In 1985, just after the Metro had opened, British Rail, as was then, still had access to the Rowntree's factory to bring in raw products and take away finished products. And they were tripped from Tyne Yard once a day using a variety of locos, but a particular pool of VDA vans. And what we've tried to do is to represent those workings in a compressed environment. And because we designed it for exhibition use, we didn't think that the people who came to an exhibition would be satisfied with just watching shunting. So we've introduced the metros and the metro cars and a metro operation to add interest as an exhibition layout. It was originally conceived to enter a competition organised by DEMU. As a result of that competition, we got invited to showcase, and the layout was well received. We took it to a number of exhibitions, but our short-sightedness in baseboards meant that we needed to upgrade it, and we decided that we'd build it from scratch. And we started this in 2007, and we've now been working on it for 9 years. The Metro had its own particular style, and luckily it's still in existence, although a different colour scheme. So I was able to go there, take photographs, do some measurements, and then make a compressed version of it, just like everything else is compressed on the layout so that it fits in. The reed switch is a very much Heath Robinson affair that operates a blue flash, so that again, for interest for visitors to exhibitions, as the Metro passes over that point work and moves under this where the two wires come together, there's just a simulated blue flash, and it's activated by a magnet on the underneath of the Metro. We've split the gauge master signal into two using circuit breakers, and one circuit operates the metros and the locomotives and just controls the trains themselves. We have a second circuit that operates the stationary decoders that work the point motors and the signals, and we use tortoise point motors, and the signals are mostly scratch built. The metros are now, some of them are now 8-9 years old. They need some work on them, but we're going to involve some of the younger members of the club by refurbishing the scenery and introducing more grass tufts and static grass to the layout, and using some of our junior members and showing those techniques, and tree building as well to put more foliage onto the layout. In an ideal world, we'd like 6 operators, but getting 6 people together at a weekend with work commitments and everything else, that's quite difficult to do. I'm lucky, I'm retired, so you know, I'm the one who picks up the van on a Friday, helps load it, takes it to exhibitions, and the downside of exhibitions is actually the Sunday night, taking it apart and then bringing it back to the club, particularly if we're far away like Bracknell or St Albans, which was a recent one for us.
Here at BRM we get many of your letters sent through, and I've had one here today. It's from a Mr. Peter Davis. Peter's from Conway. He says, "Dear BRM, I'm in the middle of building a 00 gauge layout and I'm having trouble finding the correct colour to paint my track. It should be rusty, but I don't know which shade to choose as it either looks too rusty or just the wrong shade. Can you help me? Well, Peter, I can help you, and I'm going to demonstrate on this piece of O-gauge track. Now, the reason I've chosen O-gauge against double O is purely because the cameras will pick it up much easier for this DVD. Anyway, here's a section, these first 3 sleepers which I've painted, and of course 3 sleepers which I haven't painted. This is just standard Pico track. You'd get exactly the same in double O gauge, minus perhaps a little bit of detail on the chairs, but nevertheless this is a great project to get started on over the winter months. So let's get started. I'm going to show you how to get your track painted and looking, well, more realistic. Let's give it a go. So before we even start to paint the track, just make sure that you've got the extra details on it. Now, there's a great little etch here. This is available from numerous outlets actually. Your local model shop will probably have one of these in store in a pack. Different manufacturers make them, little fish plates. Now these are purely cosmetic. They won't serve any purpose whatsoever to the outside of your track other than to make it look more realistic. I certainly wouldn't rely on them for making electrical joints. Make sure you use your dropper wires for that. But when cut up, you see there's 2 sides to them. One is with the square bolt head, the other the round, and applied to your track on either side. So make sure you've got your round bolts on the inside and your square nuts and heads on the outside. They look very nice, and it just adds another feature to your track. Now that's for the rails. Of course, you will want to also add perhaps some detail to the sleepers. Now you can see here, and this happens quite often on the real railway where there are wooden sleepers used, you get the odd split. Now this is where one of the little chairs has been screwed in perhaps a little bit too tight, and has over time just cracked its way through the sleeper there, and this is very easy to create. All you'll need is a scalpel. So I don't know, let's choose this middle sleeper here, for instance. I'm just going to use the back of the scalpel, and remember, it's got to go usually from one of the little bolts that holds it in place, and just scribe it all the way across your sleeper. Don't apply too much pressure in the first go because you might ping the blade off and it might end up going flying. Now, using the back of the blade, make sure that you don't make too much of a cut. It's more of a scribe we want to make. You're able to see now that we've got a little trough in there along the sleeper, and I don't know, maybe it continues right the way through underneath and comes out this side here, right up to the end of the sleeper. Now, not every sleeper is necessarily going to be treated like this, but perhaps this is in a siding. It's not as important as if it was on the main line, and it just adds extra detail to your track. There you have it. So, fish plates and the odd damaged sleeper aside, now we can get started painting. The important thing to remember, Peter, is that track is never one overall colour. As you can see on these 3 sleepers here that I've weathered up. The first one here has got a little bit of chalky marks to it. Occasionally, you get this sometimes from ballast staining as a new load is dropped across. Sometimes you'll get these little drips of oil which drip onto the track there, and sometimes you'll also get the rust staining through from the track onto the sleepers. So try not to treat it as one uniform overall colour. Your track will look much better for it. Now, first things first, to get started, I'm going to give it an overall coat of brown green. This is from Live Colour, so it's an acrylic paint, dries faster, and of course you'll be able to see the results much quicker. This is UA748 if you're looking for it. And I'm just going to give this an overall coat on the sleepers. So it's more of a wash, this first coat, than necessarily an overall colour that we're looking to achieve. Now this is more to just kill the colour of the plastic. It looks like we're hardly applying any paint at all, but actually you'll see when I apply the hairdryer in a minute that it will actually change the colour of the plastic quite considerably as it dries. So with that little job now done, all we need to do is apply some weathering powders over the surface of the paint. Now I've just used the hairdryer very quickly just to quickly drying it off. Of course, if you're doing this on a layout, that might not be practical. So straight into the 2 weathering powders that I mixed previously with the paintbrush there. Still a little bit of paint left on the brush from what I've been painting. And we're just going to gently work this along the lengths of the rails. To create variation in the hue of the sleepers, I'm applying a little bit of the live colour PG116 South Europe Dry Mud colour. Now this is very good to create little areas where there's perhaps been a recent reballast and a little bit of it has spilt over the sleepers and just changed the hue of them. Now you don't necessarily need to do this on all of the sleepers, but if we just refer to the photograph, you'll see that there are two, or at least one or two sleepers on this one here, which have this kind of effect. And also depends on what era you're modelling. Chances are if you're modelling the steam era, it's more likely to be an overall dark hue of oil, soot, and, well, generally the odd bit of grease that's spilt onto the rails. So you're probably not going to see an awful lot of this sort of tone on 1960s modelling. Nonetheless, that's another effect that you can play with. So there you have our completed section of track. Well, completed, I say complete, but not quite, because we can go one step further. And that's to add the odd section where there's been a little bit of an oil leak, or perhaps even a routine maintenance where the fish plates have just been greased to make sure that the nuts won't seize should the track be replaced at a later date. So let's give that a little go. For that, I'm going to use a little bit of exhaust runs effect from Nitroline. This is from Wilder, and in fact, just removing the top there, you can see it is already very, very thin and dilute. You won't need to use an awful lot of this on the brush. I'm actually going to swap it for a very fine brush. This here is a Humbrol 00 detail brush. Very, very fine tip on there. Any brush will do as long as it's got a very, very fine tip, and you can really get into the detail. So maybe some of these bolt heads, they were overly generous and applied a bit too much grease, and it's just, with the heat, dripped down, formed a bit of a mess there on the edge of the rail. You can always do the other side as well, don't forget. Once you're done with that, you can always go one finer with a number 1. So there you have it, a great little project to start on your layout to create more realistic track. Give it a go, and of course, by all means, send pictures of your efforts to BRM, and we'll look forward to seeing them. Hello viewers of BRM TV, I'm here today at the Mid-Suffolk Light Railway. Now, just 25 years ago, this site was nothing but an abandoned field, and yet today it's a local thriving steam railway. I'm here to witness its special Steam Gala weekend event, so let's take a look, but first of all, let's meet up with a chap called John Reeve.
Welcome to the Mid-Suffolk Light Railway, Howard.
Thank you very much. What's going on?
Well, we're getting ready for our Grand Steam Gala, which is 2 days, tomorrow and Sunday. As you can see, we've got a mix of live standard gauge steam and live model steam as well. Fabulous, look at that. I mean, wonderful stuff. So what we're doing is we're having one model railway at this end of our line and another one at the other end. So for the first time for many years, the Mid-Suffolk Light Railway will be over 1/4 of a mile long. It's an exact scale model of what Brockford Station actually looked like, track layout and buildings, the whole thing, in the MSLR days. And as you've seen from some of the old photographs in the museum, it stayed that way for the whole of the history of the line. It's built by a man called Peter J. Wilde, who was a great friend of ours. He built all this, and it's been here on display before. Then when he retired and he was looking to sell it, ultimately it was agreed that we would buy it, so we bought the whole of the model. But what he did as a bonus to us was to give us all the stock that runs on the track. Well, what often happened was that they would just shunt off the one coal wagon. It would sit in the siding for 3 or 4 days, well, however long, and the villagers would come and help themselves and take the coal, and then next train came along after it was empty, would take the empty wagon away. And usually the mixed trains ran during the middle of the day. So it took an inordinately long time to do the 19 miles from Hawley to Laxfield.
Now, this here is believed to be the oldest horse box known to exist in the UK. So, John, I mean, a brilliant monument almost.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how old it is.
1869, so nearly 150 years old. Nobody has come back to us and said they've got an older one. So I'm getting more and more confident every time I say it's the oldest. I believe it probably is. Used to running horses and their grooms and indeed hounds in that door there. This is the dog box as well as the horse box.
Obviously not the original chassis.
No, again, what we found was a hen house, and it was refurbished by our team in our own works again. Again, a fabulous job. To the same level of finish and standards as you've seen before on the smoking coach.
Yet again, it's another brilliant restoration by the crew who are responsible here on the railway for restoring these wagons, and it just makes it that special find. I mean, there's plenty of rolling stock here to the particular era, which is you won't find on your average tourist railway.
No, that's right, and we're not looking to do that.
No.
So no rusting Black 5s or Mark 1s.
Or Mark 2s even, there's quite a few.
Yeah. We only want things that could conceivably have run on the line, even though unfortunately there was nothing left that did.
So John, in addition to the O-gauge layout, you've also got a double O-gauge layout. So I can see the track plan looks very similar to what we've got outside. What was the purpose of it then?
Well, it's an exact copy of what we've got outside. It's not really an operating layout. It does run from time to time and did years ago, but we use it now as a static demonstration, and it was built originally to show visiting children and others who might have difficulty visualising what we were doing on the site, what it was going to look like, because we hadn't put a number of the sidings in then, we hadn't put a number of the loops in, and so it was built deliberately for that purpose. And there were 1 or 2 things we've changed. I mean, obviously we've added an engine shed since then. The pond has grown somewhat slightly. But it was at the time, and we're going back 10, 12 years, it was an aide-memoire, a picture drawn in models to show people about what was happening at the site and what we intended to do.
Good use for a model railway.
Exactly.
Well, of course, no day would be complete without a good old fireman's cup of tea and a nice Belgian bun. Anyway, if you've liked what you've seen here today, you can get involved too on the Mid-Suffolk Light Railway. For details of all of its events, including its Santa specials, which are just around the corner, and its New Year's steam, visit its website at www.mslight.co.uk. www.mslr.org.uk, and you'll be able to find all the events online. Anyway, we've had a great day here at the Mid Suffolk Light Railway, so until next episode, take care folks, and happy modelling.